Hello and welcome to Common Ground, an inside look at Suffolk County. I'm your host, Sheriff Steve Tompkins. Now, this is the moment that I've been waiting for. In fact, I've been telling friends all day that I've been waiting for this moment today, to which I was asked whether or not I had a dull and boring life. But I don't. I have a quite exciting life, but I'm really energized by this mayor's race. And tonight we have two extraordinary individuals here, two former city councilors, actually, Larry DiCara and Mr. Michael McCormack. And we're going to talk about the mayor's race. We'll talk about the gubernatorial race. We'll talk about a whole bunch of stuff, all politics, all the time. So without any further ado, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming by.
Great to be here, Steve.
Really
Nice
appreciate
to be
it.
here, Sheriff.
Okay, so but Larry's been here a couple times. Let's start with you, Michael. What do you make of all of this with the mayor's race?
Well, my sense is, based on the poll that was released today, the Suffolk poll and the Globe poll, that the electorate is pretty much disengaged. They don't seem to be as fully engaged as both Larry and I would hope in a mayor's race where it's been 20 years since we've had one. It's a little disappointing that we don't see more activity, more enthusiasm from the residents and the Boston voters. But it's exciting for folks like me and Larry and
me,
and
yeah,
you,
right,
Sheriff,
right,
of course,
right.
and people who follow it.
Right.
It's been an exciting race, and there's a week left, and a lot of things can happen.
So, Larry, let me ask you, I've talked to some friends recently, and they said that they thought there may be actually less than 100,000 votes that are going to come out.
I think it's going to be more than 100,000. I'm a great optimist about lots of things.
Right.
Any man my age with 3 16-year-old daughters has to be an
Oh,
optimist.
okay.
So I think it'll be close to 125,000. Okay. What that probably means is that 20,000 votes get you into second place. Mm-hmm. I do not view it as happened in '83 when the newspapers tiered it and put 3 people to fight for the 2 slots and the rest of us were tossed onto the floor. I believe that 6, 7, perhaps 8 people could get 10,000 votes, which is an extraordinary different race in '83, much more like '67, when there were 6 candidates who received more than 10,000 votes, and the second place finisher, Kevin White, received either 28 or 29.
So tell me, what do you think about the field? You've got 12 candidates, 6 of which are of color and 1 female that's involved with the race. What does that say about where the city has come from? If you look back to the the bad issue with busing to present day, what does it say about the city?
I think it shows the city has matured. I think we're a post-racial city. I expect when the votes are counted that Charlotte Golar-Ritchie and John Barrows, and to a lesser extent Felix Arroyo, will get lots of votes in neighborhoods where there are not a lot of minority people. And that's a really good thing, because that's very different from 1983. And I also expect that some of the candidates who are not candidates of color, perhaps John Conley will get some votes in black communities, and Rob Consalvo should run very nicely in Mattapan, and Mike Ross in Mission Hill. So that's a different city, and as far as I'm concerned, that's the city folks like me dreamed about 30 years ago.
Michael, what does that portend for the city, though? So going forward, is this an anomaly, or is this what politics could conceivably look like?
I think it's portends good things for the city. The census is it's a majority-minority city, but it's still, the mayor has been the mayor for 20 years. There has not been a lot of time for some of the district candidates, in Charlotte, former state rep, to put together a citywide campaign. They've never done it. Folks like John Conley have an advantage. Dan Conley certainly does. Marty Walsh, because of the union support, they can turn out an organization on election day, which is pretty impressive. District people just don't have that ability. Mike Ross is a terrific person, good candidate. But it's hard for a district city councilor coming from Mission Hill and the South End and Beacon Hill to turn out a citywide organization. So I think it's going to get much better. Once the Latino population gets engaged in politics, and the African American population gets engaged, it's going to get better. I think we joke about the last white mayor in Boston, but I'm not quite sure we've seen Boston with the last white mayor. It's getting there, but it's not quite there yet.
As an aside, what do you think about the civility of the spots, the television spots? I mean, I think they've all been, some of them have been very creative, they've been nice, but they have been civil and not attack ads. What do you think about that?
I think attack ads are more effective than civil ads, but it's, they all seem to like each other and get along well. There was one debate where there was some, I think Dan Conley made a little bit edgy comments, but I mean, overall, it's more like sitting around smoking the peace pipe than it is.
Yeah, the fascinating thing about a preliminary election as opposed to a primary is that whoever is number 1 or number 2 better be calling up number 3 and number 4 and number 5 real quickly looking for support because it's coalition building. And my guess is the top vote getter gets 25,000 votes. Nobody will get elected with less than 65 or so, maybe 70 in November, and that means they have to come up with a lot of votes. And you do that by putting together coalitions with some of the people who did not prevail. So I think that's one of the reasons they're civil. I also think, and Mike, feel free to disagree, you ran in '83 for the council. Kevin was very unpopular as he exited office. Towards the end of his life, he was a beloved figure for a whole bunch of reasons, in part because much of the good that he tried to do came to fruition. That's very different with Tom Menino, who is a beloved figure. And I believe even after his very serious illnesses, a majority of the people, or just about 50%, wanted him to run again. So one cannot run against Tom Menino as a whole bunch of people ran against Kevin White. I think that also helps to keep it more civil.
So when you talk about civility, I was going to ask you about that in the present mayor, Mayor Menino, when he said, look, do your race, have your race, do your thing, but don't talk disparagingly about the city that we all love. Do you think that kind of played into how people are approaching this?
I think so. He's not a very good person to have as an enemy. I've been lucky. I hope you've been lucky.
I have, yeah.
But some of my friends have not been lucky.
Yeah.
And he meant it. And he meant that from the bottom of his heart.
Yeah.
And this is Tom Menino's city. He has built it physically and otherwise. He is significantly responsible for the racial harmony that we have, certainly in comparison to a generation ago. And I think he really means it, that if you trash my city, I'll go after you. And I think that's one of the other reasons for the civility. I think you're correct.
So, Michael, let me ask you this now. The top kind of burning issues when we first got into the race, you can take your pick, you can rank them any way you want: education, public safety, jobs in the economy. But of late, the casino discussion has really, it seems to me, overshadowed some of these other issues of importance. What do you?
Right.
What's your take on just how significant this discussion around casinos is happening now?
I think it's by and large an issueless race. John Conley, I think one of the reasons he enjoys a small lead is because first of all, he announced he was going to run while Tom Menino was still the mayor, and staked out the only real credible issue, and that's education. How do we improve our schools? The casino issue, casinos are going to happen. The real issue, the only issue, is whether it's going to be an East Boston vote only. And I think most of the city council candidates, who I think 9 or 10 have said, we don't want to get involved. We don't want to get. I mean, that's the issue. Right. They don't want to get involved, right. And they'd rather just let East Boston and defer to Councilor LaMartina and say it's an East Boston issue only. I'm not sure I agree, but the city councilors who have a role have elected not to get involved. So I don't think it's as much of an issue as perhaps it should be and would be under, say, Mayor Flynn, or Ray Flynn as a city councilor, perhaps Larry DiCara as a city councilor, who might have said, wait a minute, this is a citywide issue. This isn't just East Boston.
I think the one thing that the casino issue has done, it's given Bill Walczak, barely known, an opportunity to differentiate himself from the other candidates. Not so sure it'll bring him victory, but I expect it will get him votes, especially in some of the downtown precincts, where I would guess in wards 3, 4, and 5, the casino's not very popular. And I think Walzek will get some votes for that one reason. And the other great thing about all my friends who live in those wards is they don't feel bad about voting for someone who may not win. They feel proud about it.
Which is interesting, which is very interesting, because people always they desire to vote for the person that they think will win. But folks that I've talked to, it's like, take a John Barrows. Love John Barrows. Thinks he's really, really good, but it may not be his time for this seat at this time.
I think John Barrows will get far more votes than the polls suggest.
Think so?
And I was discussing earlier today that we have a group in Jamaica Plain who are emailing each other back and forth talking about the mayor's fight. I expect there are groups like this across the city.
Yeah, yeah.
And these are older, left-center people, been in JP for a long time. John Barrows has lots of support. John Barrows has come on like a house of fire.
Right.
And this may not be his time, but he's going to get a lot of votes.
But those folks will still vote for him, if I understood what you said. Even though he may not win,
Yes.
they want to show that they believe in this gentleman.
Absolutely.
Well, I think he's the surprise of this race. I mean, he went from, I know he's a member of the appointed school board, and he's got a terrific background in terms of education, but he's never run before. And the next thing I know, he's showing reasonably well in the polls. And the Boston Globe, which is still the dominant political creature in the city, has decided that he's one of their two endorsees. It's very impressive. Very
thought that was
impressive.
quite. What did you think about that, Larry?
I was surprised.
I was shocked.
And it was a very strong endorsement. I'm guessing they had lots of meetings talking about this, and I read it word for word. Not going to influence the way I vote. I have a little knowledge of these things. But for all those undecideds, I think some of them will break for Barrows. And the Globe poll, the most recent poll, the Herald poll, was taken before the Globe endorsed. So I have to think Barrows is in the mix. And that may not be good news for Charlotte.
Yeah.
Because they are competing for some of the same votes, not only among people of color, but also among white progressives.
Yeah, those folks in Dorchester. Conversely, the Herald poll a couple of days back, where they voted, they picked Conley, which also surprised me. But the thing that really surprised me about that was the anybody but Marty Walsh non-endorsement. What was that
I have
about?
never seen that before in my life. Have you, Mike?
Not
Disendorsement?
once before.
Yeah.
Marty Nolan's Anybody But You, Kevin.
Okay. The Bastille Day, 82.
But that was for mayor, and Kevin
Yeah.
was under siege
Right.
by the U.S. Attorney's Office, Bill Weld, surprisingly enough. But to a non-endorsement such as Anybody But You, Marty, very surprised. And I don't think they had the Globe had the candidates in for interviews. I don't think the Herald did.
My understanding was that they did not.
So
Had you heard different? Yeah, that was my understanding. They hadn't.
I think that's right. It just came out of the blue.
Yeah.
And if I were the Walsh campaign, I would be down talking to Joe Shaka, who's the political person,
right,
or
right.
Shelley Cole, and say, "What's this all about?"
Yeah,
You know,
I'm sure they did. And the thing that really gave me pause is a lot of union folks, men and women, read the Herald.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, and this was kind of a whack at their guy. I mean, look at, whether you think Marty can get in or not. I mean, he's a good guy who's got a huge following and
Paid a lot of dues.
Paid a lot of dues, but the trades are solidly behind him.
See, at one time, being an endorsee of a union was not a bad thing. This has become, well, if you're endorsed by the union, somehow that it's not a good thing, and I disagree. I mean, my dad was a member of Local 26, the Hotel Workers Union. I've been a union member for many years, as Larry. I mean, the unions are there for a reason, to protect their workers, and the fact they select a candidate is a good thing.